So, first topic, my op-ed. It appears tomorrow in the Sunday edition of the Orange County Register. Tomorrow's Sunday, April 13th. And I really hope you'll read it, which, maybe you can go out and buy a copy at the supermarket, or, there is a paywall, but they have a great deal right now. You can get 26 weeks of the Register for $2. So you can find that online, and I'll put a link in the show comments. But I really hope you'll read it, and especially, the action is, if you like it, share it with people you think need to hear it. And I'll just give you a little teaser. This is the opening paragraph. I just returned from vacation in France. As a transgender woman, I was amazed by the complete absence of transphobia. I was treated with dignity by every French person I met. It was always Madame or Mademoiselle. Nobody stared, pointed, or asked barbed questions. Little cruelties that are now everyday occurrences at home. The only transphobia I experienced came from other Americans. It seems to me that the French live by their revolutionary ideals of liberté, égalité, and fraternity. Americans, not so much. So there's a teaser. That's the opening, and I hope you'll share it with folks if you like it. Next point, second point, we're going to talk about Colonel Meyers. Colonel Meyers is the Space Force commander Space Force colonel who until recently was the commanding officer of the U.S. base in Greenland. She was the host when Vice President J.D. Vance came to visit, and she immediately upon his leaving sent an email to her entire command that was essentially distancing herself from and implying that she disagreed with the Trump administration's expansionist policies in Greenland. For this, she was fired. Now, I'm going to surprise a lot of you, but here's the point. I think she needed to be fired. I think it was deserved. I don't wish her ill, and I'm sure she's done wonderful things in her career, but this was a grave lapse in judgment, and it undermines civil-military relations. So, my action for this is going to be that if you agree with me, and I'll try and give it to you brief, but if you agree with me that what she did was unprofessional and did not help civil-military relations, it actually hurt them, my action for you is that you try and let other progressives who are trying to make her a champion and a hero know that this is not something or someone we should be promoting. And let me put it to you this way. The entire history of the United States, from George Washington putting down the Newburgh Conspiracy to Ulysses S. Grant's interaction with Abraham Lincoln, to George C. Marshall and Dwight Eisenhower, the entire history of our military is that it is an apolitical military. It's more than just like civil servants being apolitical. It's no one should know an officer's political opinions. Yes, they have them, and yes, they get to vote, but while wearing the uniform, officers, especially senior officers, should not be seen to have opinions. Yes, they are obligated to give frank advice to their superiors, but when the superiors don't take that advice, they keep it to them damn selves. And that's critical. I know this from having studied 6 years of military history at Duke and from having spent years in the military myself. And I'll point out two seminal works. Samuel P. Huntington's 1957, The Soldier and the State, is to this day the most important canonical work on civil-military relations. And in essence, he says the military should be a professionalized military. The officers should be an elite that concern themselves with making themselves the most effective warfighting tool possible, and that they are that tool, and they are not to have an influence or a direct influence or personal opinions about foreign policy or matters of state. That they serve the Constitution and this Constitution only, and that part of that is following the direction of civilian authority. And another one would be a guy named Charles Tilley, wrote a book called Coercion, Capital, and Power. And that was about the creation and the evolution of the nation state in Europe. And what he basically found is The essence of those nation states was a strong military, but one that was always subservient to civilian control. And that's what we've had in the United States. And that's precisely what Trump is undermining. And even though you might like the position that she took here, the manner in which she took it is precisely what we're trying to keep the Trump administration from doing, of politicizing the military. And I will tell you from my personal experience, that's exactly what I saw when I went to places like Tunisia and Egypt and Albania, Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Chile, Argentina, Brazil, South Africa, Namibia, South Korea, the Philippines. All of those countries are countries that their militaries have at one time interfered and taken over the government. And even when the civilians are in control, because their militaries see themselves as political forces that have their own interests, civilian authority is always listening for footsteps and concerned with how any policy or action will be received by the military. And that's precisely what we don't want in America, and that's precisely what Trump is starting to do with his politicization of the military. And the fact that this officer, though she may have had a more liberal bent on this position, the fact that this officer, Colonel Meyers, felt emboldened to disagree with the policy of the nation is really a symptom of how bad things have gotten already. And it's been canonical. This is not what we teach our officers at the military academies, but it's what's being eroded, and it's dangerous to our democracy. All right. So again, if you hear folks lionizing Colonel Meyers' actions here, interject a little skepticism and trying to let people know this isn't healthy for civil-military relations. It's dangerous to the democracy. Third item is the National Emergency Act of 1976 and how Trump has used it as the basis for 8 declarations of emergency, 4 or 5 of which deal explicitly with his taking the rights or taking the power to issue tariffs, which is a power of Congress, but he's usurped it using this act. And the act gives the president broad powers and broad opportunities to declare emergencies. However, the Congress has the right within 30 days or after 30 days to revoke any declaration of emergency the president may have made. And I'll read you the 8 declarations of emergency he's made under the National Emergency Act. So there are 8 of them. The first is the crisis on the southern border, by which he thinks we have, the right to arrest anybody we want and send them to torture prisons in El Salvador. The next is the supposed energy crisis, so that he can end the green policies of the Biden administration and drill, baby, drill. The next is the designation of drug cartels in Mexico as terrorist organizations, and he's already floated and talked about the idea of that being a pretext or that being his authority to take military actions, including boots on the ground in Mexico, so we could have our own little Vietnam right on our border. And by the way, the CIA has already, based on that, deployed drones, surveillance drones over Mexico, a violation of their sovereignty. The next is imposing duties or an order saying that he has the right to impose duties or tariffs on our northern border because of fentanyl. He has an identical tariff emergency declaration about the southern border and fentanyl that he claims gives him the right to impose tariffs on Mexico. Then he has a national trade emergency with China and its unfair trade practices that gives him a right to, he says, to impose tariffs on China. And then there's another one imposing sanctions on the International Court. And the final one is the one that he put out for the supposedly reciprocal tariffs. They weren't reciprocal. They were just huge tariffs that they wanted to levy against any country that had a trade deficit with the United States. It's ridiculous and scary. And people, are under the impression that a lot of these have been, that this has all been rescinded. No, there's still the over 100% tariffs on China. And then there are 10% tariffs across the board that are already in effect and that are going to start destroying our economy and that are destroying the good faith and credit of the U.S. government and are causing people to think whether the United States is a safe haven for their investments and to park their money in things like U.S. treasuries. And as they start to pull out of that, it's going to up our the cost of servicing our national debt astronomically, make us pay much higher interest rates, and has the ability to break the United States in an economic way we've never suffered. No, not even the Great Depression would pale compared to what happens if there's a fundamental run on the U.S. currency and we suddenly stop becoming the reserve currency of the world. We're screwed. But I digress. Getting back to these declarations on tariffs, the one on the northern border, the one on the southern border, the one on China, and then the one on the supposedly reciprocal tariffs, all those emergency declarations could be revoked by Congress. Now, we know that in the Senate and in the House of Representatives, no bill can come to the floor without the leader's approval, with the exception of a thing called the discharge petition. So if a majority of the members of that body, so if a majority of the senators in the Senate or a majority of the representatives in the House sign a petition to bring a bill forward, once a majority is reached, that bill must be brought forward, discussed, and then voted on, up or down vote. So the Republicans are doing everything they can to make that difficult. They want dear leader to have all the power. They are abrogating Congress's responsibility of power of the purse and of making the laws like tariff laws. But, they're going to start facing and have started to face a lot of heat, and it's only going to get worse over these tariffs. And what we need is a discharge petition. Now, this could really work. Once the Republicans start feeling this heat, there's going to be incredible pressure on people like Young Kim to sign a discharge petition if we have one. So we need to start. Democrats need to circulate one, and if we get, we need 6 Republican votes. Assuming all the Democrats voted for a discharge petition or signed the discharge petition, we'd need 6 additional votes, and 2 of those could actually come from the 2 independents in the Senate, and the other 4 then would come from Republicans. But one way or the other, we got to find 6 non-Democrats to sign that petition in the Senate. And in the House, it's even closer. It's a total of 4 in a much bigger body. We'd only need 4 Republicans to sign a discharge petition. If we can make that happen in both houses, we can reverse all these tariffs, all of them, right? And fix it. And by the way, I think it would be a very healthy signal to send the rest of the world, and they would trust us and see us, not going off the deep end. But even if we're not successful in getting those Republicans enough Republicans to sign a discharge petition, and we can't overturn these tariffs, it's a product. It's a way of really emphasizing that the Republicans, it's not just Trump. All these Republican lawmakers have participated in destroying our economy with these asinine tariffs. So just imagine, like me, you go up to Young Kim's office and you're pointing at them and saying, why haven't you signed this petition? My 401k has crashed. The dollar is crashing. Our economy's in trouble. People are losing their businesses and being foreclosed. And you could have done something about it. Why don't you sign? When are you going to sign this discharge petition? That's what we need going around. So the action there, get on 5 calls or just look up who's your member of Congress and who are your senators. And even if they're Democrats, they need to hear it as much as anybody. They need to know this is a place where we need to be fighting. So that's it. 3 actions. 1, please read my op-ed. 2, and share. 2, we want to correct progressives when they say that it's progress that Colonel Meyers tried to do this or try and lionize her action. She should have resigned, and it's bad for civil-military relations. So please try and make that argument if I've convinced you. And 3, we need to encourage our lawmakers and reach out to them this week, demanding that they circulate and sign a discharge petition to revoke Trump's powers of emergency in regards to trade and tariffs. That's it, folks. Have a great one. Bye.